The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. when I found it. Buried in 17 layers of encrypted folders, hidden behind falsified security logs and backdated access records, was a single video file that would destroy everything my former boss thought he'd built. My fingers trembled slightly as I clicked play, watching 3 years of stolen intellectual property, embezzled funds, and forged client contracts unfold across my screen. The very same screen that 3 months ago had displayed my termination notice for security protocol violations I never committed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Dr. Michael Torres, CEO of CyberGuard Solutions, had made one crucial mistake when he fired me. He forgot that I was the one who designed their entire digital forensics system. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now being paid by the very company that had destroyed my reputation to investigate the hack that would ultimately destroy theirs. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Back when I still believed that competence and integrity mattered more than office politics and gender bias in the cybersecurity world, my name is Dr. Chen. And I used to be the Senior Director of Digital Forensics at CyberGuard Solutions, one of the most prestigious cybersecurity firms on the West Coast. I had built their entire threat analysis division from the ground up, developed proprietary algorithms that could trace digital footprints through the darkest corners of the internet, and personally handled some of the most high-profile corporate espionage cases in Silicon Valley. My team respected me, clients specifically requested me for their cases, and I had been featured on the cover of CyberSecurity Today magazine as one of the top female innovators in the field. I should have seen the writing on the wall when Torres hired his golf buddy Derek Manning as the new Chief Technology Officer. Manning had an impressive resume on paper, degrees from all the right schools, connections at all the right firms, but when it came to actual technical knowledge, he couldn't debug a simple SQL injection if his life depended on it. What he lacked in skill, he made up for in charm and an uncanny ability to take credit for other people's work. The first red flag came during a client presentation for Meridian Bank, a major financial institution that had been hit by a sophisticated ransomware attack. I had spent 3 weeks tracing the attack vector, identifying the vulnerabilities, and developing a comprehensive remediation plan. The night before the presentation, Manning insisted on reviewing my materials to ensure consistency with company standards. The next morning, I watched from the back of the conference room as he presented my entire analysis as his own work, complete with my proprietary detection algorithms and custom forensics tools. When I confronted Torres about it afterward, his response was dismissive and telling. "Sarah, you need to understand the bigger picture here. Derek has the client relationship skills and executive presence that, frankly, you lack. Your technical contributions are valuable, but we need someone who can communicate at the C-suite level." The implication was clear. My 15 years of experience, my PhD in computer science, my published research papers, none of it mattered as much as Manning's ability to schmooze with other men in expensive suits. Things escalated quickly after that. Manning began systematically undermining my authority, excluding me from strategy meetings, reassigning my team members to projects he claimed credit for, and questioning my methodologies in front of clients. The final blow came 3 months ago during the Prometheus Industries case. We had been hired to investigate a data breach that had compromised their entire customer database. My analysis revealed that the breach hadn't come from external hackers at all, but from someone with administrative access who had been siphoning customer data for months. The evidence pointed to David Kumar, Prometheus's head of IT security, but Kumar had connections, a brother-in-law on Prometheus's board of directors, and apparently a golf partnership with Manning. When I presented my findings to Torres, he was furious, but not at the evidence of corporate malfeasance. He was angry at me for pursuing a lead that could embarrass our client and potentially cost CyberGuard their biggest contract. "You're being reckless, Sarah," he said, his face red with anger. "These accusations could destroy our relationship with Prometheus." Kumar is a respected professional with 20 years in the industry. I won't have you destroying someone's career based on circumstantial digital evidence. But it wasn't circumstantial. I had packet captures, server logs, even security camera footage that I had enhanced using facial recognition software. Kumar had been in the server room at the exact times the unauthorized access occurred. using credentials that should have been impossible for him to obtain. When I refused to alter my report, Torres made his decision. Within a week, I was called into HR for a disciplinary hearing. Manning had filed a formal complaint claiming that I had violated security protocols by accessing servers without proper authorization during the Prometheus investigation. The accusation was absurd. I had used the same standard forensics procedures I had employed for hundreds of cases over the past 5 years. But Manning had documentation, emails that I had never sent, access logs that had been mysteriously altered, and testimony from 2 junior analysts who owed their jobs to his recommendations. The hearing was a sham. Torres had already made up his mind. Despite my protests, despite my perfect performance record, despite the fact that I had built half the systems I was accused of illegally accessing, I was terminated for gross misconduct and security violations. My access was revoked immediately, my personal items were packed by security, and I was escorted from the building like a common criminal. The final insult came 2 days later when CyberGuard issued a statement to the industry trade publications announcing that Derek Manning had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Digital Forensics, taking over all responsibilities for my former division. Starting over at 38 years old, in an industry where reputation is everything, was the hardest thing I had ever done. The cybersecurity community is smaller than most people realize, and word of my termination for cause had spread quickly. Major firms wouldn't return my calls. Headhunters stopped reaching out. I went from being one of the most sought-after digital forensics experts in the country to being virtually unemployable in a matter of weeks. That's when I decided to start my own consulting firm, Phoenix Digital Forensics. The name felt appropriate since I was literally rising from the ashes of my former career. I rented a small office in downtown Portland, hired 2 brilliant junior analysts who had been overlooked by the big firms, and slowly began building a client base among smaller companies that couldn't afford CyberGuard's premium rates. The work was challenging, but rewarding. We handled everything from divorce cases involving hidden digital assets, to small business data breaches, to insurance fraud investigations. My team was lean but incredibly skilled, and we developed a reputation for thoroughness and integrity that the big firms often lacked. We weren't making the kind of money I had been used to at CyberGuard, but we were building something real, something that belonged to us. That's why the call from Torres 3 weeks ago was so shocking. His assistant reached out on a Tuesday morning, asking if I would be available for a consultation on an urgent matter. When I called him back, his tone was completely different from our last conversation. Gone was the condescending superiority, replaced by something that sounded almost like desperation. "Sarah, I know we had our differences, but I need your help," he said without preamble. "CyberGuard has been compromised. Someone with significant technical skills has penetrated our entire network. They've accessed client files, internal communications, financial records, everything. Our current team is completely overwhelmed, and frankly, they don't have the expertise to handle something this sophisticated." The audacity was breathtaking. The same man who had destroyed my career was now asking me to save his company. I should have hung up immediately, should have told him to solve his own problems with the brilliant Derek Manning. But something in his voice stopped me. This wasn't just a routine security breach. Someone had managed to penetrate CyberGuard's supposedly impenetrable defenses, and that someone had to be extraordinarily skilled. "What makes you think I would help you after what you did to me?" I asked, not bothering to hide my anger. There was a long pause before he answered. "Because you're the best digital forensics investigator I've ever worked with, and because this breach is threatening to destroy not just CyberGuard, but several of our major clients. The hacker has access to everything, Sarah. Banking records, medical data, government contracts. If this information gets released, it won't just be our company that suffers." Despite everything Torres had done to me, I couldn't ignore the potential impact on innocent people whose data had been compromised. After 2 days of negotiations, we reached an agreement. Phoenix Digital Forensics would be contracted as an independent consultant to investigate the breach, with complete access to CyberGuard systems and full autonomy in our investigation methods. The fee was substantial enough to keep my firm operating for the next 2 years, and Torres agreed to provide a written recommendation that would help repair my professional reputation. Walking back into the CyberGuard offices for the first time in 3 months felt surreal. The same security guards who had escorted me out now welcomed me back with professional courtesy. My former team members approached me cautiously, clearly torn between loyalty to their current leadership and respect for their former boss. Manning was conspicuously absent, supposedly attending a conference in Las Vegas, though I suspected he was avoiding the awkward situation of working with the woman he had helped destroy. The initial briefing was sobering. The breach had been discovered 2 weeks earlier when several clients reported unusual activity in their networks. Further investigation revealed that someone had gained administrative access to CyberGuard's central servers and had been systematically copying client data, internal communications, and proprietary forensics tools. The hacker had been incredibly careful, covering their tracks with sophisticated anti-forensics techniques and using encrypted channels to exfiltrate data. What worried Torres most was the hackers' apparent familiarity with CyberGuard's internal systems. They had navigated the network architecture with the precision of someone who understood exactly how the company's security protocols worked. They had bypassed multiple layers of protection that should have been impossible for an external attacker to overcome. This wasn't a random cybercriminal looking for financial gain. This was someone with intimate knowledge of CyberGuard's operations, someone with a specific agenda. As I began my investigation, setting up my equipment in a conference room that had been cleared for my use, I couldn't shake the feeling that this case was going to be more personal than Torres realized. The hackers' methodologies, their choice of targets, even their timing, all suggested someone who knew CyberGuard from the inside. Someone who understood not just the technical systems, but the company's culture, its weaknesses, its secrets. I just had no idea that by the time I traced every keystroke, every data packet, every digital breadcrumb left behind, I would uncover a conspiracy that reached far beyond a simple case of corporate espionage. The real story wasn't about. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Who had hacked CyberGuard? It was about why they had felt compelled to expose the truth that Torres, Manning, and their associates had worked so hard to bury. The first clue came from the timestamps. After 48 hours of analyzing server logs and network traffic, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The initial breach hadn't occurred 2 weeks ago, as Torres had claimed. The unauthorized access began 3 months and 2 days ago, exactly 24 hours after my termination. Whoever had done this had waited just long enough for my access credentials to be fully purged from the system before making their move. My hands moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of encrypted communication and sophisticated routing protocols. The hacker had used a technique called traffic correlation masking, bouncing their signal through servers in 17 different countries to obscure their true location. It was an advanced method that required intimate knowledge of international network infrastructure and significant financial resources. This wasn't some disgruntled employee acting alone. This was someone with serious backing and even more serious skills. The breakthrough came when I discovered a pattern in the data exfiltration. The hacker hadn't randomly grabbed files from CyberGuard's servers. They had specifically targeted documents related to 3 particular cases: the Meridian Bank investigation, the Prometheus Industries breach, and a third case I hadn't heard of involving a pharmaceutical company called Nexus Therapeutics. All 3 investigations had one thing in common. They had been handled personally by Derek Manning in his new role as Senior Vice President. I pulled up the Nexus Therapeutics file and felt my stomach drop. According to the case summary, Nexus had hired CyberGuard 6 months ago to investigate suspicious activity in their research databases. Someone had been accessing confidential drug trial data without authorization. Manning's report concluded that the breach had been caused by a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group, and CyberGuard had recommended a complete overhaul of Nexus's security infrastructure at a cost of $12 million. But as I dug deeper into the digital forensics data, I found something that Manning had either missed or deliberately ignored. The unauthorized access patterns didn't match typical foreign intelligence operations. The timing was too regular, the data selection too specific, and most damning of all, the access was coming from IP addresses registered to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. a shell company that, according to corporate filings I accessed through a legal database, was owned by a holding group that included Derek Manning as a silent partner. Manning hadn't just failed to identify the real perpetrator of the Nexus breach. He was the perpetrator. He had been selling pharmaceutical research data to competitors, while simultaneously billing Nexus millions of dollars to protect them from a threat he had created. The elegance of the scheme was breathtaking in its audacity. Manning had turned CyberGuard's reputation and resources into his personal money laundering operation. My investigation into the Meridian Bank case revealed an even more disturbing pattern. The ransomware attack that had crippled their systems hadn't been the work of external hackers either. The malware had been deployed from within Meridian's network by someone with administrative access, someone who had used stolen credentials to bypass every security measure. But Manning's official report had blamed Russian cybercriminals and recommended a $8 million security upgrade that CyberGuard would naturally provide. The stolen credentials belonged to Janet Morrison, Meridian's head of information security, a woman who had supposedly fallen for a sophisticated phishing attack. But when I traced the digital evidence, I found something Manning had overlooked in his rush to blame the victim. Morrison's credentials hadn't been stolen through phishing. They had been extracted from CyberGuard's own client database, where they were stored as part of the bank's security assessment profile. Someone with access to CyberGuard's systems had used Morrison's credentials to frame her for an attack they had orchestrated themselves. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Manning wasn't just embezzling money or selling data. He was systematically destroying CyberGuard's clients from within, creating security crises that only CyberGuard could solve, then charging millions to fix problems he had created. It was the perfect crime, hidden behind layers of technical complexity that most executives would never understand. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. As I traced the network intrusion deeper into CyberGuard's systems, I found a hidden partition on their main server that contained files I had never seen before. Encrypted communications between Manning and Torres, financial records showing massive payments from shell companies, and most damning of all, a detailed plan to expand their operation to target government agencies and military contractors. Torres wasn't an unwitting victim of Manning's schemes. He was a full partner, providing corporate cover and client access while Manning handled the technical aspects of their conspiracy. They had been running CyberGuard as a front for industrial espionage and fraud for at least 2 years, systematically betraying the trust of clients who had hired them to protect their most sensitive data. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed to understand how the current breach fit into their operation. If Torres and Manning were already stealing millions through their fake security incidents, why would someone hack CyberGuard to expose them? The answer came when I finally traced the intrusion to its source. The attack wasn't coming from outside CyberGuard at all. It was coming from within their own network, from a server that had been configured to automatically copy and encrypt all communications between Torres and Manning. Someone had installed monitoring software on their systems months ago, quietly collecting evidence of their criminal conspiracy. The so-called hacker wasn't trying to steal data for profit. They were building a comprehensive case file that would expose everything Torres and Manning had done. When I cross-referenced the server configuration with employee access logs, I found the signature I had been looking for. The monitoring software had been installed using administrative credentials that belonged to me, credentials that had supposedly been deleted when I was terminated 3 months ago. But here was the crucial detail that Torres had missed when he hired me to investigate the breach. I was the one who had designed CyberGuard's credential management system. I knew how to create persistent backdoors that would survive account deletions and system purges. The hacker wasn't some external threat targeting CyberGuard for financial gain. The hacker was me. Or rather, it was the automated monitoring system I had installed during my last week at the company, when I had begun to suspect that something wasn't right about Manning's meteoric rise and Torres's sudden change in management philosophy. I had configured the system to activate only if certain trigger conditions were met, conditions like the systematic targeting of specific client cases or unusual patterns in financial transfers. For 3 months, my digital watchdog had been quietly collecting evidence, documenting every conversation between Torres and Manning, every fraudulent report they had filed, every payment they had received from their criminal activities. The system had been designed to remain dormant until it had gathered enough evidence to ensure a successful prosecution, then automatically begin transmitting the data to secure servers I controlled through Phoenix Digital Forensics. But there was one final twist that even I hadn't anticipated. As I reviewed the complete evidence file that my automated system had compiled, I discovered that Torres and Manning's conspiracy went far beyond simple fraud and industrial espionage. They had been working with a network of corrupt executives at client companies, deliberately creating security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by foreign intelligence services. The Prometheus Industries case that had cost me my job was just the tip of the iceberg. David Kumar, the head of IT security I had correctly identified as the source of their data breach, hadn't been acting alone. He had been part of a larger network, coordinated by Torres and Manning, systematically compromising corporate databases and selling access to the highest bidder. When I had gotten too close to exposing their operation, they had destroyed my career to protect their conspiracy. My hands were shaking as I compiled the final evidence package. Bank records showing payments totaling $43 million. Encrypted communications detailing plans to target defense contractors and government agencies. Video recordings from security cameras showing Manning and Torres meeting with foreign operatives in hotel lobbies and parking garages. The scope of their betrayal was staggering. A systematic assault on American corporate security that had been hidden behind CyberGuard's reputation for integrity and excellence. I had spent 3 months rebuilding my life after Torres destroyed my career for getting too close to the truth. Now I had enough evidence to destroy not just his company, but his freedom. The automated system I had installed was still running, still collecting evidence, still preparing to transmit everything to the FBI's cybercrime division at exactly 9 a.m. the following morning. Torres thought he had hired me to save his company from a sophisticated hacker. Instead, he had invited the architect of his downfall back into his inner sanctum, given me complete access to his systems, and paid me handsomely for the privilege of gathering evidence that would send him to federal prison for the rest of his life. The irony was perfect. The same digital forensics skills that Torres had dismissed as insufficiently executive, the same methodical attention to detail that Manning had mocked as lacking vision, had created the most comprehensive corporate espionage case in cybersecurity history. Tomorrow morning, when the evidence package automatically transmitted to federal authorities, Torres and Manning would discover that their greatest victim had become their most dangerous adversary. I looked at my watch, 11:47 p.m. In just over 9 hours, everything would change. But first, I had a presentation to prepare. After all, Torres was expecting a briefing on my investigation findings. I was certainly going to give him one he would never forget. The conference room was packed at 8:45 a.m. when I arrived with my presentation materials. Torres had invited the entire senior staff, eager to hear how the brilliant Dr. Sarah Chen had solved their cybersecurity crisis. Manning sat in his usual spot at the head of the table, his expensive suit immaculate, his confidence radiating as he chatted casually with the other executives about his weekend golf game. He had returned from his convenient Las Vegas conference just in time for my briefing, no doubt expecting to take credit for whatever solutions I had developed. I connected my laptop to the projection system and pulled up my first slide. The room fell silent as everyone focused on the screen, expecting technical diagrams and network security recommendations. Instead, they saw a simple timeline with 3 dates highlighted in red. The day of my termination, the day the first unauthorized access began, and today's date. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I know you're all expecting a standard cybersecurity briefing, but what I've discovered over the past 3 weeks goes far beyond a simple network intrusion. What we're dealing with here is the most sophisticated insider threat case I've encountered in my 15-year career." Torres shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly puzzled by my opening. He had expected me. Present solutions, not create more drama. Manning, however, had gone completely still, his practiced smile frozen in place as he stared at the timeline on the screen. "Let me start with the good news," I continued, clicking to my next slide, which showed a detailed network diagram of CyberGuard's systems. "I've successfully identified the source of your security breach. The bad news is that the threat has been active for much longer than you realized, and it originates from within this very room." The executives exchanged nervous glances, but Torres leaned forward with interest. That's exactly what we hired you to find, Sarah. Which of our employees has been compromised? Is it industrial espionage? Foreign intelligence? Neither, I replied, advancing to a slide that showed financial transactions flowing between shell companies in the Cayman Islands and numbered accounts in Switzerland. Your company hasn't been attacked by cybercriminals, Dr. Torres. It's been used as a front for cybercriminals. For the past 2 years, someone has been systematically exploiting CyberGuard's reputation and client relationships to orchestrate a massive fraud operation. The room erupted in confused murmurs, but I held up my hand for silence. The scope of this conspiracy is staggering. Fake security breaches manufactured to justify millions in unnecessary upgrades. Client credentials stolen and sold to the highest bidder. Sensitive research data extracted and delivered to foreign competitors. And, most disturbing of all, a coordinated effort to compromise American corporate and government security infrastructure. Manning finally found his voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. Sarah, these are serious accusations. I hope you have concrete evidence to support such claims. I smiled and clicked to my next slide, which displayed an encrypted email conversation between two parties identified only as Executive A and Executive B. The content made several board members gasp audibly. Oh, I have evidence, Derek. 3 months' worth of comprehensive digital forensics data, including every email, every financial transaction, and every compromised client system. Would you like me to read some of your correspondence aloud, or should I just skip to the video recordings? The color drained from Manning's face as I advanced through slides showing bank transfers, meeting locations, and time-stamped security camera footage. Torres had gone rigid in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests as he realized the magnitude of what was being revealed. This is impossible, Torres said, his voice barely audible. Our security systems would have detected any monitoring software. Our encrypted communications are completely secure. You're absolutely right, Michael, I replied, using his first name deliberately to emphasize the shift in our relationship. Your security systems are excellent. I should know, since I designed most of them, including the automated monitoring protocols that have been documenting your activities since the day after you fired me. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Several executives pushed back from the table, clearly trying to distance themselves from Torres and Manning. I could see the mental calculations happening in real time as they realized their careers were about to be destroyed by association. You see, when you terminated me for security violations I didn't commit, you made a critical error in judgment. You assumed that destroying my reputation would neutralize the threat I posed to your operation. But you forgot that I had designed many of the systems you were using to hide your crimes. Systems with persistent monitoring capabilities that survive credential deletions and administrative purges. Manning tried to stand, but I continued relentlessly, clicking through slides that showed the complete scope of their conspiracy. The Meridian Bank ransomware attack that you blamed on Russian hackers? You orchestrated it yourself, using stolen administrative credentials. The Nexus Therapeutics data breach you attributed to Chinese intelligence? Your shell company sold their pharmaceutical research to 3 different competitors for a total of $18 million. Torres found his voice, though it shook with rage and fear. Even if what you're saying is true, you can't prove any of this. Industrial espionage cases are notoriously difficult to prosecute, and corporate communications are protected by attorney-client privilege. I laughed, genuinely amused by his desperation. Michael, you're not my client. You never were. I've been working for the FBI since the day you hired me. Every conversation we've had over the past 3 weeks has been recorded with their full knowledge and consent. Federal agents are already executing search warrants at your homes and seizing your financial records. As if on cue, the conference room doors opened and 6 FBI agents in tactical gear entered the room. Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez, whom I had worked with on previous cybercrime cases, stepped forward with arrest warrants in hand. Dr. Michael Torres and Derek Manning, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit computer fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of the Economic Espionage Act. You have the right to remain silent. The aftermath unfolded with the precision of a military operation. Torres and Manning were handcuffed and led away, while the remaining executives sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Within hours, news of the arrests had spread throughout the cybersecurity industry, sending shockwaves through corporate boardrooms across the country. The evidence I had compiled was overwhelming: bank records showing $43 million in fraudulent transactions, encrypted communications detailing plans to expand their operation to target defense contractors, video surveillance of meetings with foreign operatives in hotel parking lots. The automated monitoring system I had installed had captured everything, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that would ensure lengthy federal prison sentences. CyberGuard Solutions collapsed within a week. Their client contracts were terminated, their security clearances revoked, and their assets frozen pending criminal and civil proceedings. The company that had once been considered the gold standard of corporate cybersecurity became a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked executive power and institutional corruption. But the story didn't end with Torres and Manning's arrests. The FBI investigation revealed a network of corrupt executives at client companies who had been collaborating in the scheme. David Kumar from Prometheus Industries was arrested attempting to flee the country with $2 million in cryptocurrency. Janet Morrison from Meridian Bank was cleared of all suspicion and received a formal apology from the banking consortium that had blamed her for the security breach. 3 months after the arrests, I received a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office. The case had resulted in the largest cybersecurity fraud prosecution in federal history, with 17 defendants facing charges ranging from computer fraud to conspiracy to commit espionage. Torres and Manning had accepted plea agreements that would keep them in federal prison for the next 20 years. Phoenix Digital Forensics became an overnight success story. The publicity from the CyberGuard case brought in more clients than my small team could handle, forcing me to expand rapidly and hire some of the best talent in the industry. Many of them were former CyberGuard employees who had been shocked to discover they had been working for a criminal enterprise. The irony wasn't lost on me that my career had been destroyed for getting too close to the truth about corporate corruption, only to be resurrected by exposing an even larger conspiracy. The same methodical attention to detail that Torres had dismissed as insufficiently executive had created the most comprehensive white-collar crime case in cybersecurity history. A year later, I was invited to speak at the annual Cybersecurity Leadership Summit, the same conference where I had once been passed over for keynote speaking opportunities in favor of less qualified male executives. This time, I was the featured speaker, addressing an audience of Fortune 500 CEOs about the critical importance of ethical leadership in cybersecurity. During my presentation, I displayed a slide showing the final tally of Torres and Manning's crimes. $43 million in direct fraud, over $200 million in damages to compromised companies, and immeasurable harm to American corporate security infrastructure. But the most damaging number was smaller and more personal. One brilliant cybersecurity professional, whose career they had tried to destroy for threatening their criminal enterprise. As I concluded my remarks, I looked out at the audience of executives and security professionals, knowing that some of them were probably hiding their own secrets, running their own schemes, protecting their own corrupt networks. But I also knew that my story had sent a clear message throughout the industry. In the digital age, there are no secrets that can't be uncovered, no crimes that can't be traced, and no corrupt executives who are beyond the reach of justice. The technology they had used to hide their crimes had ultimately become the instrument of their downfall. Every keystroke had been logged, every transaction recorded, every conspiracy documented with mathematical precision. They had forgotten the fundamental rule of cybersecurity. In the digital world, everything leaves a trace, and eventually, every trace leads back to the truth. 5 years have passed since that morning, when federal agents walked into CyberGuard's conference room and changed everything. Phoenix Digital Forensics now occupies 3 floors of a downtown Portland high-rise, employing over 200 cybersecurity professionals who share my commitment to ethical practices and technical excellence. We've become the firm that corporations call when they need investigators they can actually trust. the industry has changed dramatically since the CyberGuard scandal. New federal regulations require cybersecurity firms to undergo annual integrity audits, and corporate boards are finally taking insider threats seriously. Several universities have added case studies of the Torres Manning conspiracy to their cybersecurity curricula, using it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked executive power in technical industries. Last month, I received a handwritten letter from Janet Morrison, the Meridian Bank executive who had been falsely blamed for the ransomware attack. She had been promoted to Chief Information Officer and wanted to thank me for clearing her name. Her career had not only recovered but flourished once the truth came to light. She ended her letter with a simple but powerful message. Thank you for proving that competence and integrity still matter in this industry. Torres and Manning are serving their sentences at different federal facilities, their appeals having been denied by every court that reviewed their cases. The evidence was simply too overwhelming, the digital trail too comprehensive to challenge. During Manning's sentencing hearing, the federal judge described their scheme as a betrayal of trust that strikes at the very foundation of American cybersecurity. Torres received 22 years, Manning got 18, and both were ordered to pay full restitution to their victims. The most satisfying vindication came 2 years ago, when I was invited to testify before Congress about cybersecurity industry reform. Sitting in that hearing room, explaining to senators and representatives how automated monitoring systems could prevent future insider threats, I thought about that parking lot party, where I had been deemed unworthy of the executive ballroom. The same technical expertise that had been dismissed as lacking executive presence was now shaping federal policy. My office wall displays several awards and recognition plaques, but the item I treasure most is a small framed photograph from my FBI commendation ceremony. In it, I'm shaking hands with the director while holding the citation for my contribution to national cybersecurity. The irony still makes me smile. The woman who was fired for security violations she never committed became the architect of one of the most significant cybersecurity investigations in federal history. Sometimes former CyberGuard employees reach out, sharing stories about how the company's toxic culture had affected their careers and personal lives. Many have joined Phoenix Digital Forensics, bringing their talents to an organization that values their contributions rather than exploiting them. We've built something Torres and Manning never understood, a company where success comes from empowering people, not controlling them. The cybersecurity industry learned an important lesson from the CyberGuard collapse. Technical expertise cannot be separated from ethical leadership, and companies that prioritize connections over competence do so at their own peril. In the digital age, every crime leaves a digital fingerprint, every conspiracy creates an electronic trail, and eventually, every keystroke tells the truth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.